Welcome to EIG's 39th webinar. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Our webinar is focused on project de-risking to drive speed within your new product introduction space, and we're wanting to overall reduce that lower development times and cost. This is the second in the series of webinars on de-risking. Minesweeper de-risk is really focused to increase your market differentiation. Implementing projects in a streamlined manner is one of the greatest challenges that we all have today. And with companies' limited resources, speed to implementation, while not negatively affecting the current workflow processes, have always been a challenge. So, especially new product introduction, but also across the enterprise, any large-scale project or action plan. So we look forward to reviewing this process of de-risking that Dan has developed. It's very innovative, and it's proven itself to work very well with his clients over the past few years. As a side note here, please do have your cell phone handy so that you can log into polev.com /Jim DeVries 073. That'd be great. And we would appreciate you providing feedback in the chat box or in the Q&A box. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. My name is Jim DeVries, founder and president of Enhance International Group. EIG is a platform of 45 plus consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging each of the EIG partners' tenured expertise. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining, positive margin growth. We hope that you find this information valuable to you, and we welcome questions and comments throughout the webinar. And please do have your cell phone or a separate window open for that poll EV. So we have a number of webinars upcoming in September, but we also have 2 webinars next week. Our webinar next week is on supply chain risk management and on the trade-offs between lean supply chain risk management and DDMRP. So that's a fireside chat on Wednesday next week. That'll be a lot of fun. And the supply chain risk management is how to make supply chain risk management a priority for your company. That's on Tuesday. And again, in September, we'll be resuming. We might have a webinar in late August. We'll resume the digital transformation series and we'll also be going into artificial intelligence and resume a number of the other project series that we've had. Today, we are fortunate to have with us a highly respected leader in new products introduction. It's Dan Adams. He developed the new product blueprinting process, the handbook for our B2B organic growth. Dan is the recipient of many patents and innovation awards, including a listing in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. That's pretty prestigious. And
they dropped their standards for a while there, Jim, but you know.
I don't think so. So, Dan, a few words?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to spending the time here. This de-risking methodology we're going to talk about is fairly new for us. We've been developing with clients around the world over the last 5 to 6 years, and it's just really come together, as you know, Jim. So a little bit later on, we're going to actually roll up our sleeves and get real hands-on and walk through the actual steps. So looking forward to that in a little bit.
Thanks, Dan. So we'll get started here. Again, this is the second in the series of webinars. Our third webinar will be focused on large-scale projects on September 22nd. For our agenda today, we cover why do we want to take on risk and not avoid risk. That's one way to do it, is just to avoid them. And so we'll talk a little bit about the need here in the beginning of the webinar. We'll also review uncovering your risks from our last webinar, a brief review, and then we'll get right into the de-risking case story, and then the participant demo. So during the second half of this, be prepared to participate. We'll need your feedback to make this a fun-filled webinar. So in the market today, we all are surrounded by COVID, and now it's the Delta, next is the Lambda. Hopefully not another wave, but now they're talking about a fourth wave. And I think all of us are living this new norm of an unstable new norm. And but we still need to move on. We need to continue to innovate and digitize and create differentiation in our new products. We've been looking at this quite a bit from a supply chain risk management perspective, but it really all ties together, the pandemic with new product introduction across the board. And so we need to be able to make products faster than we did before. We see that product life cycles are required to be faster. The competition is getting more fierce. So, we look at de-risking as a great way to speed up your products and making sure that they meet the market demand. So that's the impotence for this webinar as far as it is in the marketplace. Dan, do you have a few words you might want to add here?
Yeah, I mean, the thing we've seen is that a lot of companies have these big projects, especially market-facing ones. Could be a corporation or could be a startup. And because they haven't really got all the assumptions out at the very beginning and then had a really thoughtful way of processing those, they get into trouble. But when they do, using some of the methods we're going to cover today, they can either kill projects a lot faster and get those valuable resources on something that matters, or they can do a faster, better job of getting to the finish line. So this isn't trivial stuff. I'm with the AIM Institute. Most of our clients are Fortune 500 companies, and many of them are spending tens of millions of dollars in R&D. So if we can get them working on the right things and not the wrong things, it's a pretty big deal. And as you say, especially in these days, yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Great insight. So we're going to try to do the polling one more time to see if we can get your thoughts here. And how often does your company have risk-based discussions? Is this something you do annually at the boardroom only? Is it a quarterly affair? Or do you review it during the month? Or do you proactively do it on some of the projects? Or do you do it on all your projects? So give you a few minutes to respond to the survey. Would appreciate your responses. I find this quite interesting on how companies look at risk. Do they look at risk as an opportunity, or do you look at risk as something that to be avoided? So we have one response here. We welcome if you have any problems getting the link, it's in pollev.com /Jim DeVries 073 in your browser. So Dan, any additional thoughts here before we move on, if we're not going to get a response?
Yeah, I mean, I think the frequency is important on this thing. I was just coaching a team yesterday with the methodology that we're going to be covering here. And what we find is if they have fairly frequent conversations, then you don't surprise management. And so this team is actually doing a really good job. They're on a monthly basis updating management. And we'll talk about this a little later. If you see a landmine, you don't want to surprise management with it. One time you have a meeting, everything's great on your big transformational project. The next time you have a meeting, we need to kill this because. It's much better to have more frequent meetings and let them know if something is coming up as a potential landmine. That's why I like to see a pretty steady frequency, a nice cadence of updates for the management team.
Yeah, and that's been my experience. Monthly for most projects is sufficient, but if you have, it depends on the overall time frame of the project.
Yeah.
If the project is, a shorter time frame, like 6 or 8 weeks, obviously monthly is not the right time frame.
Yeah.
But large scale projects, monthly, you can manage them quite well on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
All right. So Dan, kick us off here.
Yeah. So the methodology we're going to cover can be used for lots of risky projects. It could be consolidating a plant. It could be a merger and acquisition. It could be installing a new IT system. But what we designed it for, and what we're going to cover today, is really market-facing innovation. So this is kind of like the center target, if you will. We want to bring not just incremental, but fairly transformational innovation to a market. It could be an unfamiliar market. It could be a familiar market. In fact, let's take a look at the old Ansoff matrix here. If you look at the lower two under familiar markets, you see the success rate is not too great for either of the two. In fact, click again and we'll see 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3, not great. But if you go into unfamiliar markets on the top, it gets really bad. And up in the upper right, sometimes referred to as a suicide quadrant. This is where you go to end your career. It really gets bad, right? So a question we can ask ourselves is, what if we looked at past projects? What can we learn from some of those past projects? And so let's click on that. And actually, Jim, you and I have talked about this a little bit, but most teams, if you ask them, hey, what blew up your project? They actually agree. They can agree on something that killed their budget, their schedule, maybe their reputation. And if you click again, they were usually detectable ahead of time. If you ask the team, could you have known this earlier? They will usually say yes, but we weren't looking hard enough, or we thought it was there, but we didn't want to talk about it. We didn't want to kick the can down the road. We didn't want to be the messenger who got shot by the arrows. So there's some things that we need to think about a little differently. What you and I, Jim, have referred to as landmine principles. Maybe you can share some of those with the group.
So the Ames landmine principles, I love them. You have 3 choices. You're going to step on it, you're going to stop, or sidestep. Of course, the one no one wants to step on a landmine, right? That they can see, and landmines are greater danger, in unfamiliar terrain compared to a familiar path. Also, we avoid those unhappy thoughts. Landmines are not happy. I love this, Dan. It's like a landmine blowing up in a cherished project. The landmine clearing must be intentional. We need to be intentional about it, and thoughtful about it. So finally, the sooner we spot a landmine, the greater our options. So this is why risky projects become late projects. And the team is continually surprised by those new landmines instead of efficiently planning ahead. So we'll see how to spot a landmine sooner. But first is uncertainty. And I love this, this whole idea of, uncertainty versus risk, which we'll get into on the next slide. So as it says, how do we spot landmines earlier in the transformational projects is really where we're focused on. We don't want to wait for the risk to happen or the event to happen. How do we get ahead of it?
Yeah.
So, we know that risk and uncertainty aren't the same things, right? And I think this is one of the coolest concepts that comes out of de-risking. It's very unique in the marketplace. That's why I want to present this slide, because I think this is something that you won't find anywhere else. Nobody else is talking about this in the way that Dan and the Ames Institute are. So, is it risky to cross an unfamiliar chasm, for uncertainty, and do you know how to assign a probability? And, for uncertainty, you just don't know yet. Risk, you have enough to assign a probability, but for uncertainty, you simply don't know. Risk focuses on understanding the project's next net present value, NPV, while there's uncertainty, NPV is unknown because it's undefined, and simply we just don't know yet. So we do not want to have this undue stress and overcommitment, and we avoided opportunities that do not provide real value to the project. So we need to get ahead of it and understand this uncertainty and eliminate it cheaply and early on in the project.
And I think, Jim, just thinking about that for a minute, I mean, that's really where I think a lot of companies start down the wrong path. They have their big transformational projects. They're still early on. They don't know a lot about it. And they're trying to assign a net present value or probability. Nobody believes it because nobody really knows. They're much better off just saying, we just don't know. We're uncertain. But if we get all the assumptions out there and drive those assumptions from uncertain to certain, and then apprise management how we're doing, that's really a much better way of handling the initial phases of a transformational project. Later, there's time for net present values, but not for most of the early phases.
Yeah, I think that is the coolest thing about this, because it was always hard to have those conversations with my leaders in the past to say, guys, why are we spending all this time? Well, we have to fill it out. It's in the charter agreement. We have to do an MPV.
Okay.
And then you spend a half a day on calculating an MPV when you could have been focusing on uncertainties and be much more productive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, excellent. So we have one more survey question to ask here before we get into it. What percentage of your projects do you lay out the assumptions at the beginning of the project? So we just have some different ideas there. So Dan, what have you seen out there recently?
Yeah, so what I've seen is very, very few project teams do this at the beginning. As time goes on, they'll identify the assumptions, but it's usually more in a post-mortem than a pre-mortem, Jim. The thing about laying on all your assumptions early on and then looking to see what might kill your project, that's more of a pre-mortem. It's much more efficient. It's much better use of resources. And it lets you be like a heat-seeking missile going to the thing that could be a problem early and addressing that. Whereas if you don't get all the assumptions out, they tend to surprise you over the months and years of the project. And sometimes the thing that kills a project comes up really late in the process after you've sunk huge amounts of money and time into your project. Not really a wise way of doing it, but it's very common.
Yeah. And just from my experience, when a project's off track and I would go in there to support the team, this would be where you start. What are the assumptions? And you'd find that it's going off track because people aren't laying out the assumptions. And everybody has different assumptions. So we get in the room and with padded walls, as I would say, cross-functional team, and say, okay, guys, what are all your assumptions? Get them out there. Let's put them all up on the board. And there could be no judgment on them. And you go through that and you're on your way. The beautiful thing about the AIM Institute's tool is you're doing this proactively early on in the project. You're tracking these assumptions throughout, and you don't have to worry about having that meeting halfway through your project to get it back on track.
Yep, exactly.
So with that, Dan, to you.
Yeah. Let me share my screen and we'll do this all together. And let me pop up the PowerPoint. And so let's first of all just introduce this case study. It's a fictitious one. But I'd like to welcome everybody who's joined us as employees of the Acme Composites Company. And as you may know, we made our claim to fame because we took recycled plastic and wood fibers, we made decking. And then one of us came in the morning one day and said, gosh, maybe we could take a little bit of recycled plastic and a lot of recycled paper and get into the packaging market. I mean, just think of some of the advantages we might have if we do this. Not a bad idea. Of course, we have a lot of work to do. So this would be an example of a market-facing transformational project or we're going into a major new market, adjacent or unfamiliar, and we just don't know. And so what we want to do now is use this Minesweeper de-risking process I'm going to show you to pursue this project. And so we'll do it together. And if you have questions as we go, please stop me. I'll even see if you want to participate a little bit as we go. But we're going to go through several steps. In fact, tell you what, let's do. Let me show you the steps we're going to go through. We're going to go through 7 steps. In a little bit, I'll show you how you can download this. But basically, the steps will be, we're going to brainstorm all the assumptions that must be true, create a little consumption chain to help generate more assumptions. And then we're going to individually rate the impact and certainty and resolve that as a team. Then we're going to check to see these certainty matrices, what it all looks like, create an action plan, which we call a checkpoint plan, where people will go out and investigate this and report regularly to management. So it's going to be a 7-step process we're going to go through on this thing. And I'll give you a high-level picture now, and then we're actually going to walk through one of these and do it. The first step is to generate assumptions. Now, these will be all in the form of what must be true. It must be true that this market will continue showing respectable growth. In order for our project to succeed, it must be true that the market will pay price premiums and so forth. Now, we'll divide these into 3 buckets. Some will be market dynamics, things about the market, regulatory, competitive landscape, size, growth. Some will be about our capabilities, and some will be about the outcomes and desired end results that customers are looking for. Now, if you were doing a plant consolidation or merger and acquisition, instead of a market-facing innovation project, there will probably be different buckets. But again, we've mostly focused up till now on market-facing innovation, and those 3 buckets work really nicely for this. So we're going to focus on market dynamics. So imagine we're together as a team, and we're going to, as Jim said, brainstorm about what must be true. And somebody says, MD1, market dynamic 1. Well, the total addressable market must be at least 100 million. So we get that up on a sticky note. And then MD2, somebody says, well, external regulations and industry standards can't block us. Great. So we brainstorm all these. Now we have a nice list. And then take a look at MD6. Somebody said, gosh, we got to be able to convince the entire supply chain to change at the same time. I mean, we're going to sell our composite to the blank makers. They're going to sell them to merchandise retailers like Amazon. And then shippers are going to handle the boxes. And then the consumers have to be able to open it and dispose of it. So let's get all the assumptions that must be true for all these points in the value chain. And one of the assumptions is we can get all 4 of these points of the value chain to change at the same time. That's an assumption. So then we say, well, what's the impact of that one? And somebody goes, well, that's pretty high impact, Dan. I mean, if we get the box blank maker to say, I like it, but Amazon doesn't, we're kind of dead in the water, or vice versa. So we mark this one high impact. And then somebody says, well, what's the certainty we can, achieve this one? And somebody says, we don't know. We haven't talked to anybody in the value chain. So it's low certainty. So MD6 is put over in the far lower right corner. Now we call this red zone the danger zone, but we might go out and do some investigation and learn more about this. And over time, our certainty is going up. Remember, that's the vertical axis. Now we're in the yellow caution zone. And with some more investigation, interviewing customers, talking to industry experts, we finally get this in the green safe zone. So we're moving from what? Uncertainty to certainty on every assumption that we need to address. Now, we'll do this for actually 6 certainty matrices: market dynamics, required customer outcomes, and desired customer outcomes. Those are external. And then internal assumptions. What are our capabilities? Can we scale up? Can we do this in the lab? Can our sales reach the market? Can we satisfy all of the customer's required outcomes of the solution? And can we satisfy at least one of their desired outcomes? Otherwise, we're entering a red ocean instead of a blue ocean. So we'll do this in 6 matrices. Now, what we're going to do is focus on the yellow and red. In other words, if it's way over on the left and it has virtually no impact, we don't care. If it's way over on the right and has really high impact, we better be really certain. So that's what we'll be focusing on here. Now, after we create these certainty matrices, what we'll do is our team will then take responsibility for investigating all of the red and yellow assumptions. So we might be doing market research, test work in the lab, we might be doing interviews, but in all cases, we're moving those assumptions from uncertainty to certainty. And over time, we will drive down the number of yellow and red, caution and danger assumptions. Now, we might, as a team, start this project in the beginning of the year, do some secondary research, market segmentation. Then we might have a workshop. And this is what we typically do at the AIM Institute. Now, we do these virtually anymore, but that's what we do, is a workshop to get this all kicked off. Then the team is going to review with management regularly. We might go and do some customer interviews. In the new product blueprinting world, we call these discovery qualitative interviews and preference quantitative, but you can do it different ways. Maybe you set some product objectives, build a value calculator, put together a business case, and go forward. What we're going to cover right now today are the 7 steps you would do in your initial kickoff. Now, today, instead of doing in-person workshops, we usually would do this with a team with a series of maybe 4 or so 2-hour web conferences. And that usually gets the job done. So I'll show you the methodology that we use for this, and you can do your own homegrown version of this as well. But let's walk through this process now. And as I said, we've got this de-risking quick start card. If you'd like your own copy of it, just drop Jim an email at this email address, and he'll send you this quick start card. So let's walk through the 7 steps now. In fact, you know what? Let me get out of here and do that. Let me exit here, and I am going to go over, and I'm going to be in some software now. My apologies for this, but I want you to see how to do this hands-on. So I'm going to use our software for this. Doesn't mean you need to use our software. You could replicate this yourself in Excel. In fact, we used to do it in Excel. Now it's a cloud-based project. But if I don't show you to it, it's going to be kind of ethereal, kind of theoretical. And I'd really like to show you hands-on what this actually looks like. So my apologies for diving into software, but it's the only way I know how to show you. So I'm going to create a new project, and we're just going to call this Acme demo. We'll call this, Acme Composites demo. And I'm going to go ahead and be the leader of this thing. I'm going to start this. And I could add team members, but I'm not going to do that now. So I don't know if you guys want to participate or not. Sometimes it makes it more fun. Maybe it's just irritating. So you won't offend me if you're all quiet on this. But I'm going to throw this question out here. If you were part of this Acme Composites team, and we were talking about getting into packaging, does anybody want to unmute and say, what assumption must be true for this project to succeed? Could be about market size, could be about growth, could be about our capabilities. Anybody? I'll give you about 10 seconds to see if a brave soul wants to volunteer an assumption that must be true for our project to succeed. Anybody?
You can go ahead and unmute if you like.
And if you just want to sit back and watch, I'm fine with that too. Anybody, a last call? All right. Well, then let me do it here with you guys. So it might be somebody says, it must be true that we'll go ahead and do government regulations won't block us. Okay, that might be one that we would have in here. And then we would brainstorm. But we've got some typical assumptions in here, so I'm going to cheat. We'll look over here and see there's other ones here. Let's have this one. Entrenched competitors cannot block our market entry. And then here we go. How about this one? Entire value chain is open to change as caused by our offering. All right, so that's one way of getting these kind of quickly. Now, internal capabilities.
So Dan, are those helpful hints in the software?
They are. These are helpful hints that we can put in here. And I find it's useful when I'm facilitating a team because it's a nice safety net, but they also have unique ones that we don't think about. But it is a helpful way of doing it.
So you can add your own also, right?
Exactly. Somebody could say, it must be true that we can scale up our new product to full production. So that might be
in 8 months.
Right. Yeah, exactly. In 8 months. So that might be something to add in, or we could look over these typical assumptions and see if we see any that we need to do. Maybe we think about this a little bit and we've got to make sure we can get a reliable source of our own raw materials. So we put that one in there and we've got that captured.
You could add an assumption that, well, that wouldn't go here. COVID is over.
Right, exactly. Well, those are sort of things you can put in. And then the last bunch here is customer outcomes. And now if I click this, we must meet customers' requirement too. What would be some things that an Amazon or a box maker, maybe the box maker, the box blank maker, to maintain existing fluting size. Those are those little openings they have, the corrugation. Maybe their equipment's set up, they got to keep it, maintain a standard there, okay? And maybe a desired one, maybe Amazon would say, we want to meet our desire to increase packing speed. So they could be desired or they could be required. We could also look over the typical assumptions, and maybe one of the required ones is they can't change their production equipment. Maybe one of the desired ones is they want to reduce their energy costs. Okay, so at any rate, that's what we would do. So the first of the 7 steps is to generate as many assumptions. Now, a few things that we found to be helpful. It's really good to get these in the right buckets. Now, I'll show you why that is later. It's also really good to complete the sentence. We always put this in the positive sense. It must be true that. So that really helps. And then we have these little helps here on getting them in the right buckets. Market dynamics or external factors. The purple ones here, internal. These are specific to us and so forth. Now, the next thing we do is we build a consumption chain. So let's take a look at this. This is something you could do, like in Amazon has to decide what box blanks they need. They have to order them, they have to pay for them, they have to receive them, and so on and so forth, okay? And you could also set this up for the homeowner. They need to bring the box in from the porch, make sure it's the right size, be able to open the box all the way down to discarding it. So these consumption chains help us, especially in an unfamiliar, think like the customers, because we tend to think about how they use our product, but not everything else, how they buy it, how they store it, everything else. So let's say in this case, I put in here store boxes. So after they order them and pay for them and receive them, they have to be able to store them. So we'll go ahead and put that over in here, okay? Now what do? Now we're looking at this consumption chain and we see if it generates any more ideas. And we're looking at storing the boxes and somebody says, I bet here's an assumption. We must meet customers' requirements to store box blanks in humid warehouses without shrink loss. So that might be an outcome that is generated based upon our consumption chain. So what are we doing? What are we doing these first 2 steps? We're really just diverging, getting as many assumptions that must be true as possible. So by the way, when you're doing the consumption chain, it's all outcomes, customer outcomes you're adding. So now I've got a whopping 10 assumptions here. Our experience is we've done this, my goodness, Middle East, Shanghai, India, all over Europe, US. So this has been something we've done around the world for many, many different companies. Sometimes they're startups, oftentimes they're large corporations. And typically what we'll find is we'll get between 50 and 100 assumptions coming out at this stage once we finish the market, the brainstorming and the consumption chain. So let me take a breath for a minute here. Any questions we have so far, or any questions in the chat? Everybody okay so far? Or do you have a question about this part of the process? Everybody good? Okay. Then let's move on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do individual ratings. So what we'll do is, now these can be in any order, so it can be helter-skelter here. But the software we've got here, when I click the sort and edit tab, first I check to make sure the note colors are right. Then I click sort and edit text, and it will automatically put the yellow, then the purple, then the blue. And then what we'll typically do is we'll walk through these, making sure they're phrased correctly. I know that sounds fussy, but if you don't get them phrased right, it can really blow up later. The other thing is, if I have this too long, it makes problems later on when we're looking at the chart. So we will go ahead and we'll clean these up so they're not too long. Now, the next thing I do at this point is I'm going to send this to our recipients. I could add anybody I want, my company, outside our company, whether they have the software or not. And down here, you see the email it's going to send out. So I'm going to go ahead and send an email out. And I probably should have left oh, good, it came up. So brought up my Outlook. Now, I'm not going to actually send this to myself, but you can see this would have, like, if I've got 8 people on the team, all of them would be up here as a recipient. What I'm going to do is show you what the individual rating looks like. I'm going to click on this. And so everybody on my team, or even off my team, is going to go to this link, and they are going to, look at that. There we go. That's kind of funny. Oh, I know why. Hang on a second here. I had 2 things open. Let's try that one more time. Here we go. It should work a little smoother. Okay, good. So they're going to come out here and they're going to start the survey. And then they're going to ask themselves, well, how important is it that this is true? The government regulations won't block us. Well, if they block us, we're kind of dead in the water. So that's essential. Then they'll ask the question, how certain are we this is true, that government regulations won't block us? Well, I don't know. We haven't done any work on this. And then how about this? Must be true competitors can't block us. Well, again, I'll call that one crucial. And maybe we're a little bit more confident here. So we go through these and we do our ratings on this. That's one's totally unknown. Then we get into the purple, and we better get a good source of raw materials. We'll get those. And we can scale up. It's kind of important that we'll be able to scale this up, I guess, right? But we don't know too much about that yet. Then we get into the customer outcomes. We think it's important, but we don't know that they want to keep using the same equipment. And but here's the thing: how certain are we can allow them to do that? Well, we're feeling pretty good about that. So we'll go ahead and we'll fill these in. That's probably, I'm just making these up here. We'll go kind of quickly on this just so you can see how it goes. So I fill all these in, and I'm almost done now.
So is it, Dan, only the people on the team that fills out the survey, or is it you also include stakeholders who couldn't make it?
We also include stakeholders who couldn't make it. What we'll do is could be a professor at a university, could be other people in our company. It really could be anybody that we think has some good insight into this project. So really anybody can be part of this.
So what if there's a question that's being asked that I'm not familiar with how to answer? And
then you just skip over it. Just skip over that, because that's common. Like I might be the market research guru and know all about the market size, but know nothing about the ability to scale this up. So we just tell them to skip over the ones they're not sure about.
So you don't
Yep.
have to answer every question. That's
Don't have to
nice.
answer everyone. And then when you're done, now it probably takes 20, 30 minutes because, you might have 50, 75 of these. I click complete survey. And then back here at the ranch, hang on a second. I'm in my, I know what just happened. Okay, hang on a second. I need to go back into this one. Yeah, I've got this open in 2 places, but it's okay. So anyway, I did this. Now what I'll do is I have only one response here on this, right? That was me. And so now normally you're gonna have a histogram. So you might have, several dots here and a longer bar here because you're looking at how your whole team rated these things, okay? So what I'm gonna do for our purposes now is I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna pick up a project where the ratings were already done, okay? And so now we've got the team ratings here. And you can see the histogram on the left. We're using that as a guide for how the team should make its decision. Now, what the teams might say is, oh, we had a lot of importance. Let's pick let me blow this up here. Let's pick the important. And we got that important column highlighted. And they might say, we got a lot of probablys. Let's pick that one and we'll do this. However, we don't have time to go into this in too much detail, but we've come up with some rules of engagement. We don't simply just take the consensus or the average, because one person might have knowledge that the rest of the team lacks. And so, or they might have a perspective that the other teams haven't thought of. So we let the team debate this first. And then we say, do we agree? And if we agree, we pick whatever we agreed on. Maybe we agreed on this, okay? But if we don't agree, if somebody is a holdout, what do? We do not browbeat them. Instead, we take the most cautious voice on the team. So there's 3 phases of discussion. I share my knowledge, I share my opinion, and then I start repeating my opinion. That's not so helpful. When team members start repeating their opinion, we say, okay, let's see if we can reach agreement. If not, we take the most cautious voice on the team. Now, the most cautious voice on this impact rating is whoever said it was the most essential. That is the most cautious voice. And whoever said they were least certain, that's the most cautious voice. So we're going to tend to move down on the scale here, which moves us to the right over here. And we're going to tend to move down on the certainty rating because we're taking the most cautious voice. So that's what we do. And then we simply go through all of these, getting all of these ratings, and we go through the purple, we do all this. So that's how we do this. We go much slower with a real team, and we finally get to the end of this thing. And when we do, then we review the certainty matrices. Now, the certainty matrices, these are what the team designated these. There's one for market dynamics. There's one for internal capabilities. There's one for required outcomes and customer desired outcomes, and one for customer required solutions and desired solutions. Now, this demo I'm showing you is near the end of the project. That's why there's so many greens in here and not that many yellows and reds. But when you start your project, you got a lot of yellows and reds you have to deal with. So let me do a quick check here on where we're at. And we went through the brainstorming, consumption chain. We did our individual ratings. We did our team ratings. And now we just reviewed the certainty matrix. Now, what I just covered probably takes two-hour web conferences as a team to do. And then the third web conference is creating a checkpoint plan. But let me take a breath here. Any questions on what we've covered so far? So far, so good?
Looking good.
Okay, all right. So now what we do is we create a checkpoint plan. Now, you can filter out and show all of the assumptions, but I'm gonna remove the green. Most teams just look at their yellow and red assumptions, okay? Then what they do is they say, okay, for this one, what do we need to do to drive this from uncertainty to certainty? Well, we need to interview some industry experts from GLG. Well, we need to do some discovery interviews here of box blank makers, okay? So that would be some methods to do this. We could also look for other assumptions that have been created in other places of this project, and we could hit the arrow and bring them over. So what we do is for all of these assumptions, MD1, DO9, for all of these, we create checkpoint tests. That's what we do here. That takes another couple hours, frankly. Now we're done with all the setup. From here on out, every time the team meets, they update their findings. So that's this tab here. So let's say we got somebody working on this. Let's say Jeff Ball, okay? Jeff has been doing some durability testing. So we say, Jeff, let's mouse over DS3. Did you learn anything about abrasion resistance? No, I really didn't. Okay, Jeff, did you learn anything about fade resistance in sunlight? No, not really. Okay, Jeff, did your durability testing tell us anything about tear resistance? Oh, yeah. Great. What did you learn? So we click on DS6, and then the source of truth automatically comes over. This is Jeff's durability testing. Jeff, what did you find? Well, I found our stuff is fantastic with resisting tearing. Oh, that's great, Jeff. So what do you think on this DS6? Can we move this up in certainty? You bet. I would move this all the way up from unknown. It's over here in the yellow. I'd even go up from perhaps and probably. I would mark this one as confident. So now it's here. So now this is going to be green. So DS6 went from yellow to green. We go back and we go back to the durability testing, and it's no longer showing up unless we hit the green filter and we can show, the results for that. So that's how we do it. Every time we get together, we're saying, what have we learned? What have we moved from uncertainty to certainty? Now, the cool thing about this is you can see your progress. So if I play this little play bar here, the team can see how initially it had a lot of yellow and red in this column. They actually found a few more. And then over time, they were getting rid of the yellow and red, converting them to green. In the upper right, look how the circles are moving in toward the origin as we're getting more confident. Now that red one was one I just created here, but you can kind of see what's happening here as well. We could also look at all the certainty matrices, see how we're doing. And then when it's time to report to management, what we can do is we can edit this report. And then we go back here. We can create a PDF of this. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Sorry, let me try that again. We can create a PDF of this. So we can send this management report to management on a regular basis. Maybe every month we send it to them, and they can see how we're doing on this project. Nice little update here. And then if we're going to make a presentation, we can click the PowerPoint and we can show them how we're doing in our talk. And what we're finding is when companies adopt this methodology, it's very helpful because rather than every team just coming up with their own PowerPoint slides, and you know what happens, we all tend to talk about the good news, not the bad news. When you have a template where everybody's going through the same things, now it's a much greater likelihood that we won't overlook things that are troubling. And also makes it easier for management to process things if they're used to this project overview, uncertainty profile, uncertainty timeline, the learning path, the status, are there any possible landmines or probable landmines? And then what do we recommend with this project? So that's how this works, kind of roll up your sleeves, hands-on. Let me just wrap this up with a couple of quick thoughts here. So if you want a copy of that sample 2-page de-risking report, drop Jim a note. He'll be glad to send you this sample, this demo report as well. And I'll close my thoughts with this. Half of the battle we've been finding with our teams that we've been coaching is helping the team run its project really well. The other half of the battle is changing the dynamics of the project reviews. You know, a lot of these reviews, by the third slide, nobody on the leadership team knows what we're talking about except for the chief technology officer, right? That's not good. If we talk about all these assumptions and explain them, the HR person, the marketing person, everybody can understand this. I want to separate my success from the project success. Hey, boss, I don't know if this project should keep going. It's early on. I'm not married to this. But here's the thing. If we need to kill it, we will tell you as soon as we possibly can. Also, boss, today I'm just giving you an update. I'm not looking for a decision. We're in the early phase. I'm explaining how we're moving from uncertainty to certainty. Later, when we have gotten rid of most of the uncertainty, I'll be asking you for an investment, a new pilot plant, a new production run, that sort of thing. And then here's the thing. I learned years ago that you need to show management you're following an intelligent plan. I had this case where we were building our first plant in China and I was responsible. And the president said, Adams, what about this? I took my Gantt chart, slid it across the polished mahogany table and said, well, sir, we've got that handle on line 72. Okay. Adams, what about that? I took my Gantt chart and said, well, we got that on line 132, sir. Good job, Adams. Then he went on and he beat up another team. And I said, oh, I get it. He doesn't need to understand my Gantt chart. He just needs to know that I've got one and I understand it. So now, in addition to a Gantt chart, which helps you manage risk, timelines, and tasks, we now have a way of managing risk, and we can show the management team exactly where we're on that chart. Let them join the team, not judge it, and it's going to go just a whole lot better if we do this. Jim, that's about all I've got. I'll let you take it on from here. I'll stop sharing, okay?
All right, Dan. Thank you so much. Very, very, very interesting. Very easy to follow. A very powerful tool. So thank you, Dan, for showing us how to make the complex simple. It's pretty amazing. When I did it, it was much more complex than what Dan is showing today. So I'm pretty excited about showing this tool and starting with you and your team on your journey on de-risking your large-scale projects. That concludes the webinar today. We have a webinar on Tuesday next week on making supply chain risk management a priority in your company. Greg Schlegel and I will be going through how to help you sell supply chain risk management to a company and then or within your company, I should say. And we also will be having a very, very interesting discussion on the trade-offs between lean, supply chain risk management, and resiliency. There's often some debate there that we're saying we're leaning out our supply chain so much that we're incurring supply chain risk, and the supply chain risk management have their perspective, and the demand-driven MRP people have their perspective. So that'll be a very, very interesting discussion on Wednesday at noon. And we'll be returning at our NPI series coming this fall on speed to resiliency. And then enabling artificial intelligence also starts in September 21st, I believe. And then the 22nd is a webinar on digital twins. And then we'll be back here, actually on the 22nd here with Dan on looking at other type of projects that we can use this fantastic tool for. So
hey,
again,
Jim,
yeah.
just one thought, Jim, just occurred to me. You've got some guest passes. So if anybody wants to sit through our 3-hour workshop where we really go into this methodology in more detail, should they just contact you and you can give them a free guest pass?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, they can contact me. I'll send that out on the email follow-up like I did last on our first email. So Again, EIG, we have a group of companies to help you and your organizations become more self-sufficient. And with that, I think we're all set. Dan, thank you. Any closing words?
No, thanks for having me on, Jim. I know this is a topic near and dear to your heart. I would just say to the others who joined us, thank you very much for taking the time out. I know it was kind of rushed. If you want any of those hard copies or those copies that Jim has, let him know. And if you say, well, I want to dive a little deeper into this, we have a 3-hour public workshop that's normally it's $195. And we usually do that every month, but in August, we're taking a little break. So I think the next month, September. If you're interested in it though, just drop Jim a note. He'll give you a guest pass. So when you go out to Eventbrite, it won't cost you anything.
So we do have a question, Dan. Dan, we do have a question from Jacob, our first attendee here. I understand that you select or settle on the most impactful rating from among the survey group. My question is whether you solicit uncertainty rating for the group about the likelihood of the selected degree of impact perceived by the person promoting the most impactful rating.
So what we do select the most impactful, but it's not just the impact. We're picking what we do when we're on that team resolution. We're looking at the histogram. And we really are looking at two things. What's the impact? Like, oh man, this is crucial or it's essential or it doesn't matter. That's one thing. But we're also looking at our level of certainty today. So we factor both of those things in. So I don't think, Jacob, unmute if I'm not answering your question well, but it's things that will score high impact that the team agrees are both high impact that we don't have much certainty about today. Those are the ones that will land in the red zone. And we're going to make sure that the team everybody on the team is comfortable with both the impact rating and with the certainty rating. So if somebody isn't happy and they go, I'm not as certain as the rest of you jokers, I don't think we should rate that, they win. If somebody goes, I think this is a more impactful assumption than the rest of you jokers, they win. Does that help, Jacob?
Yeah, it does. So in fact, I thought that what you meant was that not everybody agreed that this impact would be this great, but I thought that these two ratings would depend in the sense that after people have settled on this particular impact, then what is the likelihood of this impact happening, surveying the whole group,
Yes.
so that these two ratings are dependent rather than.
Yeah, very good. I skipped over that. So you're very observant. So when we do the impact rating, what's the impact on a project? That's the first question. But then on the certainty rating, you're very perceptive. I didn't read the question very well because I didn't want to take too much time, but there's really two parts to it. First one, let's say the impact was, the assumption is the market must be at least $100 million, okay, in total addressable market. And we rate the impact if it is or isn't. Then the certainty question actually is a two-parter. How certain are we that the market is $100 million? And how certain are we that we correctly rated it in terms of whatever impact, right? I think that's where you're going.
Yes.
Now, what if they said, oh, I'm really, really certain that the market needs to be $100 million, but I'm not really certain that it's essential. They have two different ratings, right? In that case, take the lower certainty rating. Very good, very keen. So there is a dependency built into that. And when we're facilitating, we go a little slower and we help people work through that. Frankly, most of the time people are answering the first question, how certain am I that it's got to be $100 million? But the people who are maybe thinking a little bit harder, they're also asking, how certain am I that I rated it correctly? Does that help, Jacob?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Very good.
Jacob, thanks so much for asking a question. Any great question, very insightful.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Jacob, or any other folks? We can keep going. We're here for you. All right. All right. Let me see. If there's nothing else, we'll conclude for today. Thanks so much. Hope to see you at a future webinar. Again, thank you for attending and your feedback. Anything that you can feed back to us to make the webinars better in the future, please feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you and have a great day and great weekend. Enjoy your summer.